Welcome to True and Unpolished, the podcast, a Cusp Culture production. Through this podcast, our intention is to uplift, inspire, and amuse.
Let's get authentic. Hi, I'm Lydia Singleton.
And I'm Nicole Wilson.
And you are listening to True and Unpolished, the podcast. Today we have guest Christy Sprati with us. Christy is a child psychologist and honestly a brilliant writer. I didn't get her approval to say that, but she is. She writes some amazingly inspiring things. And Christy works with parents, writes beautiful, inspiring things to parents. And what we're talking about specifically today is parenting as a path for spiritual growth. And so, right, what's spiritual growth? That is coming to know our essence, the truth of who we are. It's kind of unlearning all of our fear mechanisms. Is fear mechanisms a thing? No, our coping mechanisms and strategies that we've learned to kind of defend ourselves against the world. And so in a spiritual journey, you're letting go of those things so that you can get in touch with the truth of who you are, who you came here to be. And I have an example of something that happened last week, and I'm going to do my best to tell you this without telling you this. So something happened with my young son that made me realize that we needed to have a version of the talk. Does everybody know what I mean? I'm just imagining you all shaking your head right now. Yes. It was amazingly hard. I realized that this needed to happen. And what happened immediately within me was pure shame. And it's crazy because I didn't even know I had this shame. I didn't know that I was carrying this around from my childhood, but I had this, instant of feeling shame. And I had these two very specific incidents from my childhood, memories that I had not thought of ever, that just came to me all of a sudden. And what I realized is that very early on, I got the message that sexuality was not okay. I grew up in a very fundamental Christian home. And so I never got the talk. No one ever gave it to me. This was the talk. It's don't have sex, period, the end. And we're done with the conversation. And so I recognized that I was completely ill-equipped, number one, to have this conversation. I also, to be fair to me, I really thought I had more time than this. I did not think it was about to happen when it did. So I was kind of shocked by it. And right away, I went to the computer and I ordered 3 books that are on my nightstand right now. And the books themselves made me feel, shame. And so I recognized that I needed to talk to my kids about this, and I had this shame. So in order to be helpful to them, I had to acknowledge that I had this shame and kind of articulate that. And so I did. So we had a version of the talk and it went well. My oldest son was just completely embarrassed and mortified and didn't want anything to do with it. And my youngest son wanted to ask all kinds of questions and see every picture in every book. And he would have talked about it on and on and on constantly. He'd still be talking about it if I hadn't stopped it, if I hadn't reached my limit. So Christy, here's my question. Did I do the right thing or the wrong thing?
So the right thing in telling them?
Yeah. First of all, my thought was, okay, I have boys. So should my husband be having the conversation and not me? Which one of us should have it? And I knew, I don't know. I think I have some control issues when it comes to parenting. And I tend to want to do it all because I don't trust anybody else to do it. So I'm wondering if, number one, the book thing was right. I showed pictures. It was very uncomfortable. So here's what I said. So I should be very specific. Here's what I said. My oldest son said, why do we have to talk about this? I don't want to talk about this. And I said, I understand. And the reason why you are feeling embarrassed and you don't want to talk about this is because I have been embarrassed when things like this have come up. And so, and just because we feel embarrassed doesn't mean it actually is embarrassing. It's just a feeling that we have. And, you know, the world kind of teaches us that, you know, we need to be very secretive about this kind of thing. And it gives it this, you know, it gives us a feeling like it's not okay and it's not normal. And it is normal. And actually, one of the books is It's Perfectly Normal.
Well, first of all, I think it's fine. My son is younger than I know your children are, and he's asked me some questions about where do babies come from and things like that. And I've had the converse, not to the depth you probably did with your boys, because I know they're older, but I've had a version of a conversation with him with some very simple pictures as well, because I always feel that that's what creates the shame, is by hiding it and making it feel shameful. So the more you can be open and honest in a developmentally appropriate way, the less shame will manifest now, but especially in adulthood around these topics. So I think being open and honest, I don't think, to me, the gender of the parent is irrelevant as long as you have the language and comfort level to have that conversation. Even if you don't have the comfort level, that's what it was coming to me as you were talking, is that you're kind of navigating the ship while you're, while you're on it. And so you're charting this new course as a parent, but also you're unpeeling these layers of yourself at the same time. And so by you being open and willing to step into that conversation, you're also healing yourself, or unraveling those unconscious conditioned beliefs of yourself. At the same time, you're supporting your children on their journey. So I was kind of I kind of navigated my response off of what your initial question was, but I do think anyone should be open to have that dialogue with their children, because the more we can put secrecy in front of any topic, that's where the shame comes from. The more we say this is taboo, the shame comes from there. And I think Nicole posted something on her Facebook recently that said something like, I don't want my kids to say, I can't tell mom this. I want them to be the first person they come to. And I think that is, in alignment with what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that I was just willing to be honest about the fact that I was uncomfortable, and so rather than me fake being comfortable, I felt like the thing to do was to embrace it and just acknowledge it. Like, yep, I'm uncomfortable too. And this is something, we have to do. And Kat, my oldest son, has a tendency to say things like, why do we have to talk about this? Like, if it's something he doesn't like, he'll say, why do we have to talk about this? And I'll say, well, because it is. And even if we don't like it, we still have to talk about it because it's happening. So, and I know I don't want to talk solely about this, our whole conversation, but I do recognize that, I also just recently realized that, so my oldest son is in 4th grade, and I realized, through watching them and had the memory that 4th grade for me is when I had a huge shift. It went from, having a sort of innocence and being playful and kind of easygoing. And then in 4th grade, it was like that door slammed and I was in this whole other reality. And so I think that as we are navigating parenting with our kids, this stuff naturally comes up for us, and it's there because, again, we're trying to unlearn these coping mechanisms, and we don't even know that we have some of them until we bump up against them, like in this instance for me and the sexuality thing. And I don't even begin to know what book I should buy for myself because I'm certain I need one. I did get a book, you guys. Oh my gosh, I did get a book. It's called Aphrodite's Daughter. And I've read like 4 pages, but it's supposed to be on like women and embracing your sexuality and all of these things. Yeah, so I can't like give it a plug because I only have read 4 pages, but maybe some of you could read the book and tell me if it's good.
And highlight the key points.
Yeah. So do you have any examples like the one I gave? Like what's an example in your experience as parenting as a path for spiritual growth?
What I think that maybe not a specific, well, there is a specific incident that comes to my mind, but one of the things I was reflecting, knowing we were having this conversation today last night, and it's funny, just book side note, my personality is that I like to be extraordinarily prepared for any event. Yes. And so I went to go find my parenting books, my conscious parenting books. And I recognize they are all in my office, which I don't visit very often because we are in a pandemic. So I went at 9 o'clock last night to start reviewing my books, and they're not here. So.
But they are totally within you, child psychologist Christy Sprati. You did not.
I know, but I found that the universe was sending me a message there that I didn't need to do that prep work. But I did sit with it a little bit last night, and one of the top things that came to me, one of the top lessons that I've learned, and I've talked about this in other forums. And in fact, I recently did a mindful parenting class, and the biggest lesson, I've learned many, I shouldn't say the biggest, but a big lesson that I've learned through parenting as a path for spiritual growth is just the power of the pause moment. Yes. That one breath. And in fact, the last parenting class we were talking just kind of about how that is really our path to freedom, is that pause, so that we have the space to choose. But there's this moment that comes to mind, and when I had toddlers, mm-hmm. my response, I have a lot of anxiety, particularly around health issues. And so when you have little kids, they're often provoking that anxiety because there's illness prevalent in your home. And I have this specific moment, and I just remember it was the day before my daughter was going to start kindergarten, and we were trying to have this beautiful outing together. So I'm sad already and emotional because she's starting full-time school. And we went to a park, and we found, those rocks that are painted with lovely little messages like "be happy." Well, this happened to be a red M&M. I'll never forget it. And I had this and so my daughter put it in her mouth and started licking it, in which I had a panic. I mean, literally internally had a panic attack. And I kind of had this visceral reaction like, no, don't do that, stop, but it frightened her. Like, I was loud and I was freaking out because I was worried about the germs on this rock. And it was that moment in which, I wasn't pausing in that moment clearly, but I had this visceral reaction, and knowing that I have this deep internal fear that was coming out in a reactive way. Mm-hmm. One, it was scaring my kids, truly. I mean, even though I'm a child psychologist, I always tell parents that I'm on this journey just as much as all of you. And it wasn't in a violent or aggressive way, but in a scary way, because I had a reaction. And I also recognize that deep kind of inherent fear within me that was just kind of bubbling to the surface because of my kids' behavior. It really wasn't, they were just the catalyst. It was really inherent within me. And so that was one of those defining moments where I recognized that, this practice of mindfulness and spirituality was really, now it was time to put that practice into place and really be conscious about taking that pause and making a conscious decision in the way I responded to my children. But to do that, first I had to step back and go within myself and kind of like you were talking about, and look at those triggers to see why I was having these visceral reactions to certain behaviors my kids were showing. And it often came from my condition patterns of childhood that developed in my childhood. So you have to unpeel those layers, heal yourself. I saw a quote recently that said, if you can heal yourself, you'll also heal your children's children. But it's really about breaking that generational, sequence of these fears, and what does Gary Zukov call it, the frightened parts of our personality. Like, they're illuminating them. Yes. For our children are illuminating them for us, so that we can begin to heal ourselves, and then obviously begin to respond to our children in new ways. Yes. And so by doing that, then we will create a new pattern in how they respond to the world from a more, centered, conscious place.
Yeah.
And then obviously their children. So.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it because, so in order to, have your parenting be this catalyst for your spiritual growth, the key is questioning it. And you said this about the why. So and for me, so when I had this happen, right, and I had this reaction of this shame, in order to really grow, in order to figure out, not figure out, but in order to get beyond that shame and that frightened part of my personality, I needed to say, why? Like, what are you? Why are you here, shame? And where did this come from? And start to really question it and, have a dialogue with it. And that is what I've been doing around this issue of, sexuality and the talk with my children, recognizing that I need to say, oh, what's this about? And where did this come from? And honestly, it made if you would have said, oh, Lydia, you're walking around with a bunch of shame that you're carrying, since your childhood around your sexuality, I'd have been like, I don't think so. I've never experienced that. And there it was. Just so big. I honestly, the way I've described it since is it's not that I felt shame, it's that I was shame. Like I literally moved my body. It was so, it's difficult to describe, but even now when it happens, I'll start to kind of flap my hands. Oh, I'm just painting a beautiful picture of myself, everybody. Because it's I needed to release it, right? And that is key, isn't it, Christy? It's that these things come up because we need to feel them. These emotions are trying to be released. They're trying to go and leave. And we tend to think that if we tense up, then we'll keep the feelings away. But in truth, the feelings are in us. And so to tense up means to push them down and lock them in there instead of release them.
Right. No, absolutely. I know that one of the practices I do for my own spiritual practice is yoga, although not as much lately because of the pandemic, because I do like to go in person. But one of the things I've learned through yoga is that when you begin, if you stretch so far that you begin to shake, you're actually releasing trapped stored emotions within your chakras, they like to say, within the yogic tradition. But so I always welcome and embrace that. Or if you're getting an upset stomach after you do a yoga practice, we're really on a great topic today,
aren't we?
Sexuality and upset stomach. But it's a release. It's your body truly beginning to release those emotions that we store within the body. And energetically, it can impact your ability to truly show up as love or joy or be that presence in the world, because you're storing these negative emotions within your body. And so you have to be able to, first of all, I remember one of the biggest lessons I learned as a parent was I was talking to some woman who is a life coach, and she just said to me, are you willing to feel your emotions? And I said, no, I don't do that. I've got it under control. I've got a planner. I've got things orchestrated. But are you willing to feel your emotions? And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, just go into your body and feel them. And truly, allow those moments where those emotions naturally arise, especially we're talking about parenting with your kids often. There's these triggers daily for me that come up. And so me being willing to go down into my body and feel the emotion and allow it to rise to the surface. I don't do it always. Sometimes I have to wait for the space to come to do it. But when you can do that and allow yourself to do it, then truly you're beginning to transform yourself, which transforms how you parent your children. So, but it was almost like it shouldn't seem earth-shattering, but it was because I wasn't doing it. I was just in my head, logicking my way out of the emotion. I wasn't going into my body and feeling the emotions that my kids were bringing up. So I was just basically in this constant loop of negative emotions that were cycling in my body. And I wasn't, like you said, I wasn't always even aware of it, and then as I became more willing to experience the emotion, then I was able to begin to let it go and move, flow. My husband's really good at letting the emotions flow through him. I'm not so good at it, but I'm learning and growing and becoming more willing to do it, which has allowed myself permission to at least go there and feel the emotions.
Yeah. And see, for me, I completely relate to what you're saying. And for me, I recognize that, negative emotion feels bad. Right. And so I learned really early on that not to do it. Like, this doesn't feel good. I'm not going to do it. And I learned to logic my way out. Like you said, I learned to, kind of use my mind to go around it instead of through it. And the recognition is that they're in there until you feel them, until, and, the spiritual journey, the spiritual path is about recognizing, the truth of who you are. And I think that often we don't even know that we are confusing who we are with the emotions we have, right? Like just a minute ago, I was saying how I didn't feel shame. I was shame, and I knew that I was one with shame. And that's what happens when we get lost in these emotions. We don't understand that we are the one having the emotion, not the emotion itself, right? And so I think that a big part of
right, just kind of that Michael Singer, like, we are the witness to our emotions in the untethered soul versus we are our emotion, but we tend to become one with the emotion and versus be the right. I mean, we forget because we so easily become one, and then we remember, and then we forget. But what was coming to me when you said that is how much, one of the things that I thought about parenting as a spiritual path is how much grace and self-compassion we need to have for ourselves. As you were talking, I think this is us being willing to dive into emotions or look at our shame. It's hard. And so often we want to judge ourselves for how we're reacting or responding. But we need, I always say one of the biggest lessons I've learned during this time of pandemic is self-compassion. Just being okay with not being okay, or being okay with being in my emotions, or not being perfect. My kids are doing a hybrid school, so they've been home this last week until they start in classroom tomorrow. And my son said a mantra the other day, and I loved it. I said, one of the things we always say are mistakes are how we learn, but he said, Mom, I have a new one. He said, we're not perfect, but we are awesome. And I'm like, yes, we are awesome. We are truly awesome, and none of us are perfect, even parents. And I always tell that to parents. They come to me as a psychologist thinking I have the answers, but I'm walking the journey right beside you. And we all are imperfect, and that's what humanity is, being human. So it's just about embracing that and having grace and self-compassion when we fumble and fall, because we will, and then getting back up and, joining the arena again and again and again. So I think that we can't forget to talk about how parenting teaches self-compassion on our spiritual journey, because I think it does for me every single day.
Yeah, that is huge. It is huge, because I think that, parenting, right? So being a parent, it is, an experience we have in life, and the experience is there to teach us, right? And so the things that we learn in parenting, self-compassion, giving ourselves grace, which I guess is the same thing, but we learn, just one of the things that I love is that, when you have a child, and I think it was Esther Hicks that said this, but, when a child is learning to walk and they stand up and they fall down, right? We don't say, oh my gosh, you're terrible. You're never going to walk. What's wrong with you? You're never going to walk. And we recognize that they're growing, and that they're becoming, and they're going to learn to walk. So we don't feel this, this pressure to make it happen for them. But we do that for ourselves. Like, we are constantly growing, constantly learning, constantly evolving. And so if we can learn to have that awareness about ourselves, that is self-compassion. It's I love you, Lydia. You'll get it. Keep going. And really just showing up for it. The Tao, one of my favorite lines in the Tao said, talks about, I know I talk about the Tao Te Ching all the time, but one of the lines is, in family life, be completely present.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. It's about your presence, and your presence, right? That's our gift. That's why we have the friends we have, right? Because our presence is a gift to them. And so I know that. And one of the things that I easily tell it to other people, but that I really have to, well, see, look, I started to do it too. So I tell other people all the time that, you don't have to be present the whole day. Like, it's too much. It's overreaching, especially like in a pandemic when our kids are here, and like you, Christy, are doing a hybrid school situation. So you're actually their teacher too some of the time, which is what was happening before for all of us. And so we have this idea of perfection. See, we talked about perfection last week, and we have this idea that we need to be present, all the time, and we beat ourselves up when we're not. And I think that that's impossible. I think it's impossible to be present every minute of your waking day with your kids. And so I know, Christy, you and I have talked before about, ending big. Just have a conscious bedtime with them, because the brain registers the end of an experience.
Right.
How it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rosy retrospect. I mean, there's a psychological term, but essentially you'll remember that last moment, and that's what it'll be reflective of your entire day. Even if the rest of the day was just meh, that right. Last moment was great. That's how your brain will encode that day. So being fully present.
I try to start the day and end the day strong, and the rest is just what it is.
Me too. Yeah, me too. And I try, my sister, gave me really amazing advice early on. She was a mother well before I was. We're 6 years apart. And she started rather young. And she said, Lydia, there's no way to be a perfect mom, but there are lots of moments where you can be a great mom, right? Oh yeah, Christy, tell them about the practice that we started and we haven't been doing for the last couple of weeks, but we were.
So we were talking about that advice your sister gave you, and I had the inspiration that in order to affirm, sometimes we forget to affirm ourselves for those moments, great mom moments or moments of presence with our kids. So I had the inspiration to, reach out to Lydia and to my friends and say, hey, when you have a great mom moment, tell me. I want to know. So text me or give me a quick call and say, hey, I just had a great mom moment, or snap a picture. I mean, not because it was to affirm ourselves for that moment and have someone else bear witness to it. And it helped me to see that those moments exist, especially in those days where you feel like they don't exist at all. Right. It gives you a new lens through which, because we all have those days where you feel like nothing has gone wrong.
Epic
fail day. And so that, great mom moment, it gives you a reservoir to look back on and say, oh yeah, I had that moment. That happened. Because we so often forget and we don't, take the moment to reflect on that being a moment of presence with our kids. And I was just thinking, when you said the moment of presence, my good friend back in college actually gave me a book, and it was called The Precious Present, and it's actually a children's book, but it's all about this moment is a gift. And so that always comes to me when we talk about the gift of presence, and that we can see that with our children too. Not every moment, but there's moments that are truly a gift throughout my day with my kids. And if I can tap in and see that great mom moment, or just see that great moment of connection with my kids, I can remember, I often forget that they exist on the hard days, but when you can remember that and just reflect with gratitude on those moments, then, we can kind of come back to center and remember that, we're all doing the best we can in any moment, and there are great moments of presence with our kids.
And the great mom moment that, when you invited me to share those with you, and we kind of started this practice, so it did several things. It, affirmed me. It also had me looking for the ways that I was great, which, and it had me registering them. Like, think of, I think that, at least for myself, I am much more likely to remember all of the not great moments and register those. Like I keep a meticulous records of my not great mom moments, but yeah, my great mom moments, they don't get a lot of press. And so that practice was so helpful because I was registering them. I was, I was taking the time to go, oh, there's one. And, and sharing. I think it's a great practice. Everybody, you guys should do this. Like find somebody in your life that you can do this with. It's been amazingly helpful. Yeah.
I agree. And it's like the practice of, I used to do this with when I would get a note of like at work, I'd get these notes from parents saying, thank you for helping Johnny. I would put this file in my desk, and then on a hard day when I was really like feeling overwhelmed with work life, I would pull out the file and read these notes as just remembering. So it's like creating your own mental Rolodex of your parenting moments to remember, especially to go back to on the hard day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know, Nicole, I've been talking a lot. Has anything come to your mind as, any examples in your life of parenting as a path for spiritual growth?
Well, actually, last night, the whole while you're talking, I'm kind of processing all this in my head. My daughter, she's 11 and a half, and she wanted to start wearing mascara. And she's a redhead, so she does not have eyelashes that are visible. And Adam and I had the discussion about her, not wearing makeup till she's 12, and but then we kind of discussed it out, and I kind of felt like I was left to make up the decision. But apparently that's not how he took the conversation. So,
I love it when that happens.
Yeah. So from my childhood, self-confidence was a huge thing for me. I was friends with all the pretty girls, and I never felt pretty myself. It was hard for me. And I have this feeling that if my daughter can wear mascara as a boost to self-confidence, even though she's 11 and a half, some of her friends are shaving their legs, they're all growing up fast. Yeah. And there's some things that I allow her to do, and there's some things that I don't. And I have been letting her wear mascara on her top lashes only. And Adam noticed it the other night for the first time and, blew up, like, what is on your face? And then we continued the conversation, just us two, and we weren't on the same page at all. And I was just trying to explain, like, she's 7 months away from being able to. She's not putting on eyeshadow or, she's not covering up the pimples she's starting to get. Yeah. It's just a little bit of, I got her brown mascara. It's not even black. I think in going through this pandemic and her with the virtual schooling, like I noticed some depression. Yeah. And it concerns me because that's a big part of my past and my childhood that I didn't understand or recognize until I got older. So I'm trying to be, I guess, preventative for her. But at the same time, I'm not trying to I don't want to overcorrect my childhood through her.
Yes.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like I don't want that to be the case, but I also don't want her to go through the same struggles that I went through.
Right. And did you ask her? Because I would think that a really important part of this would be to say, why do you want to wear mascara? Did you ask her?
Yeah, it's because you can't see my eyelashes.
Yeah, and
her eyes look naked. Her eyes look naked.
Mascara is the best, makeup ever. Like, I love mascara. Yeah, so
I know.
But isn't it true that, and my friend, our friend, Mary, is really good with helping me on the overcorrecting piece. Like I have, I tend to overfeather the nest. And so she is always there to kind of give me a check. I even check in with her. I'm like, is this me overfeathering the nest, or am I, doing the right thing? And it's particularly hard because my youngest has special needs. And so developmentally, I can't go by the developmentally appropriate thing because developmentally he's not at the age that he actually is. And so I'm constantly, trying to figure out, is this appropriate? Does he need more help?
I go through the same thing with Ellie and her dad, because Adam isn't biologically her dad.
Yeah.
And she doesn't really know her dad, and she has that whole daddy abandonment issue thing, going on. So I've always kind of been her dad in one part, and now that Adam's here, he's kind of acting as that, but yet it's not the same.
Yeah.
I mean, it's endearing for her, but it's not, she still has those. So and she has said to me, like, you don't know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't.
She's
like,
right. Yeah.
my parents are not divorced. My parents are still happily married. Like, I don't know what any of that feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I know what anxiety feels like.
Yes.
So, I try to help her navigate through that. But at the same time, I want to overcorrect to a degree.
Yeah. Right. See, that's tricky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Christy, you got something for us?
I was just thinking as you both were talking about the overcorrection, that I think a really hard piece of this whole parenting as a spiritual journey is honoring that our children are on their own paths.
Yes.
I have another friend that has a teenager that I talk to often, and that's a huge challenge when you have a 17 or an 18-year-old who are essentially an adult. But even with, a 7 or an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old, to say that their journey is their path. And so that sometimes when they fall or fumble or falter or have these emotions, we don't always want to save them, because that's part of their journey and their growth. But it's really hard as a parent to see your child have those emotions. But you haven't had that experience for a purpose, because it's their journey, not yours. But it's hard to lay that down in the moment, because we love our kids so much and we want the best for them. But truly, it's this recognition that we each have our own path and lessons learned. Even our kids, some people, we all have our own belief systems around it, but many people believe that it's on purpose that we're their parents, and that they chose us for that reason, because it's part of their journey. So
that's right.
And your daughter, Ellie's dad, it's on purpose that she has it's not present in her life, even though you don't share that experience. I have a similar experience. I was adopted, and I never had any friends growing up that had that experience. So, but I wholly, truly feel that it's a part of my purpose to have walked that journey through childhood and now as an adult. And it's making me be a more conscious, present parent, because I had that as part of my life story. But each of our kids are going to have those moments that are part of their life story that we want to sort of rescue them from. But truly, I think sometimes just honoring that they're on their path and journey and allowing them to walk that path forward safely. I mean, we want to, I mean, that's the balance. You want them to be having, I'm just reading, a book showed up in my mail called The Spiritual Child that I didn't order. I was like, oh, this is cool. There's a speaker coming up in Appleton in a few weeks, which is where we live in the general area. And I was reading it, and one of the things they talked about is it's honoring the boundary, our kids, and like, instead of, just giving them boundaries, but then allowing them to walk their own journey forward, because we, so often we try to protect them through these really tight, rigid expectations or rules. But if you can just set some general boundaries or parameters and then let them out into the world, then that will give them the freedom to have their own growth on their journey as well.
And see, so for me in my childhood, my parents were doing the best they could with what they had from where they were. But my father was a Green Beret in Vietnam, and he had lots of mental issues, physical health issues. And my mom went to work. And so everybody, mentally, emotionally, they just didn't have presents to give me. Everybody was spent, right? And so I didn't get presents from people, you know what I mean? And I didn't get any, I guess, interference from parents. And so my tendency is to try to overcorrect that with my kids, right? And interfere all the freaking time. And so, because it's like, I'm here, everybody, I'm watching you, I love you, I'm here. And so I remind myself that, and the Tao says this, it says, can you love people and lead them without trying to control them? And that is key. And I think, a big takeaway, I think if you can take away one thing from this conversation, I hope anybody that can hear this, any parent that can hear this, find somebody in your life that can remind you and give you perspective, you can share your great mom moments with, your great parent moments with, that can remind you, hey, you're over feathering, hey, you're going to have to trust that they're on their own journey. These are the kinds of things that are difficult for us to have perspective on, because when that mother instinct comes in, it's kind of like we become the role of mother, and we are not. That's not who we are. That is a role that we have while we are here, but it is not who we are. And so, and I can know that I am attached to the role, and that I've become mother instead of being Lydia, who has the role of mother, when I am wanting to control it all, when I'm wanting to, save them, fix them, help them, whatever it is. And so again, that is the reminder that these kids, that they are your kids on purpose, you're their parent on purpose, and you each have your own individual path. The quote is, your children are not your children, they come through you but not for you. And so as often as we can, to remind ourselves of that. And then the other great thing, and I don't know where I got this from, I think it was from a book, it might have been Gary Zukov, I don't know, but early on I had read this practice, and I've been doing it, and I do it with all kids, not just my own, but and I actually do it with adults too, but I think children especially, they have a memory, it might not be a conscious memory, but they have a memory that they are divine, that they are a child of God, they are born of the infinite, and they want to be seen, like they want to remember that. And so when you can look at them and just silently acknowledge that they are an eternal soul, that right now they appear to be this young child that you are here to help, but that they are an eternal soul, and you don't have to say it. If you just in your mind remind yourself of this, I watch my children light up, I watch other children light up, because that's it. They're saying, do you see me? Do you see me? Do you really see who I am? And that, you reminding yourself is what allows them to remember, right? They feel it from you. This has been an amazing conversation. And Christy, I want you to come back and talk about this more. There's so much we could say. Is there anything just in parting that you'd want to say before we get off, or should we save it for another episode?
Namaste. What came to me was namaste. That's what I say to my daughter, to acknowledge the divinity within her silently at bedtime every single night. The light in me sees the light in you, and just honoring her eternal soul. So namaste to all of you. And thank you for having me today. I'm really grateful to be here, and I would be honored to come back.
Yes, great. And I will just tell anybody that is looking for her, you can go to lovechristy.com if you want to contact Christy, or she's got some great parent resources on there. And thank you so much for coming today. This has been True and Unpolished. Let's see what happens next.